A lot of people are like perpetuating like kind of a stupid idea, which is that you can build a big newsletter business very easily by selling ads. And I think it's becoming this like make money online thing, which is like, oh, hey, you acquire an audience and you sell some ads and then like, oh my God, like money is like magically appearing and you get to quit your job and you have financial freedom. I think that is not true. You need to have a media model. You need to stack revenue, ads plus either a high ticket or service. And you should be starting with the monetization and letting that decide how you grow. That's the most important thing. Too many people start with the growth and think the money's just going to come. And that's not true.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to Letterland. We are here with a very special guest, Nathan May.
I'm so excited that we got Nathan on today because there's been this topic ever since we had Corey on from John Wall Street a couple of months ago now, I guess. I've really been fascinated by this topic of like how much money can you make? How good of a business can you build on a newsletter that only has like a very small number of subscribers? And something we've been like talking on and off about over the last, I would say a year at this point, is the idea of like having an invite-only newsletter, right? What if you like flip the switch on its head and go, okay, instead of going out there and shouting on social media and trying to get as many subscribers as you can, what happens if you basically take like the opposite playbook and say, hey, maybe I'm only going to have a few hundred or a few thousand subscribers, but it's going to be people that I've invited, super high signal, invite only, picking the people that I want. And I don't think there's necessarily like an established playbook for this yet because there aren't that many people who are doing it. But one of the few people who has done this successfully is Nathan. He's done that with his own newsletter and he has his agency, Feed Media, that he works on as well. Which feeds into it as the business part of it. So we have the chance to have Nathan on. We want to talk about it. He's covered his story in some depth on a couple of other podcasts and on his LinkedIn, which you should go and check out if you're interested in the newsletter space. So we're not going to like rehash in like a huge amount of detail exactly what he did for himself. But what I thought would be kind of interesting is to expand that out a little bit and for us to talk about like, if you were starting a newsletter today and you were interested in doing an invite-only newsletter, how could you start that? How would you do it? What do you have to think about? Who does it work for? And then maybe we'll play around with some ideas of like how you would actually do this in like for real, I guess. Does that sound good?
Yeah. So I started invite only newsletter because I felt like I had to. I felt like there's no other way. I started an agency, The Feed, and we basically do growth for newsletters, personal brands like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tyler Denk, all kinds of cool folks. And then lots of big media companies. We work with The Neuron, The Rundown, The Points Guy, all kinds of folks. The problem that I ran into is I was like a year late. There was already like a big agency and like basically all the other agency people who do newsletter growth came from like The Hustle or like Morning Brew or like Work Week and stuff. And so I was like, oh man, like this is hard. Like I'm like starting, a mile, it's like a 10-mile run and I'm starting like 3 miles behind everybody and everybody got like a head start. And so I basically had this kind of idea, look, I need maybe 500 people, on this list. I need like the founder, or maybe the head of growth at every major newsletter company that I want to work with. Why don't I just like invite them to my newsletter? And then hopefully I say stuff that they like and maybe they kind of go, hey, this is really good, Nathan. I don't really want to do it. I want you to do it. Can we hire you? And it's kind of worked.
It's funny. We were just talking about how nobody's really doing this, but it seems so obvious when you say it, right?
Well, I was just to say, it's like how like what is it? Like snail mail for like e-commerce, like the flyers and stuff you get, like people sending those and like it's kind of an unsexy thing to do now. But there's this company that Sean Prey invested in. I can't remember what it's called, but they're like killing it because a lot of like DTC companies are having luck with real mail because nobody was doing it. So I think it's like every 10 years, like skinny jeans are popular and then like, big baggy jeans are popular. Like the pendulum just like swings back and forth. And I think like high touch, email stuff, I think is in.
Can I just ask about super tactically how you were doing that? Was it LinkedIn messages were you doing? Were you like truly cold emailing these people, right? So let's use, Tim at 1440 as an example. I'm sure he's on your list. Like, how did you get him? Did you reach out to him, via email, LinkedIn, snail mail?
Yeah, man. I literally reached out to I'll use because just it's easy to get to. So Sean Griffey, who started Industry Dive, and he sold his company for $500 million. Like, maybe he's got a lot of stuff going on. Like, he doesn't know me, doesn't know who I am. I messaged him basically this. I was like, hey man, I have this private newsletter where I share growth monetization tactics with media operators 2 times a month. It's for larger operators, 1440, the rundown, references, blah blah blah. Read. Do you mind if I add you? And then sometimes people don't respond, and so you just message me again. And then he joined. And, at this point, like Sean has sent me like a bunch of really sweet emails reacting to the newsletter content. He's asked me to add like Robin as head of growth, Imogen as head of sales, like a bunch of other people from Industry Dive. And so the hope is like you get people here because there's not a ton of friction, to join, an email list. And then hopefully, I try to do is make really valuable stuff so they want their friends on.
Nice. What is it you think about like the manual outreach or like the private outreach, the invite only nature of it that is useful here? Because I'm thinking like, is this the case that like, let's take Sean or someone like that. Are the people who are reading this, are they not reading other newsletters about newsletters? Is it like, is the difficulty like getting them to sign up for a newsletter in the first place? Or is it more about like, why would they sign up for your newsletter if you're maybe when you were starting out, like you said, right, like 3 miles behind, like maybe you don't have the profile publicly that some of these other operators have? Was it more like that thing, or more like just they're not reading newsletters in general, so let's target them in a way that maybe makes them take notice?
Yeah, so I'll tell you why I think this worked for me and what are all the scenarios in which this like could maybe be interesting, like as a methodology for acquiring subscribers. For me, I know that like the newsletter space is not that big. And so like I can quickly go and get, a couple people on the list like Tim, right? And then that is like extremely high, Tim 1440. That is extremely high social proof for other operators who want to be here. Everybody kind of knows each other in the newsletter, in the media space. And so it's not super hard to then go to the next 10 people. And they've got mutuals and like, I can see the beauty is all this is on LinkedIn. So everything's very open. Like I can see who Sean is connected with on LinkedIn. And so sometimes I'll send people, if I don't know anybody, I just have like a template message that has a couple cool companies that are on. But like I used companies with whom Sean has a mutual connection. And a lot of times I'll use peers if I'm reaching out to somebody. And so they feel a little bit of FOMO. If I am, I don't know what a good example would be. Like if I'm Daily Drop, or actually if I'm the Rundown, which is like the largest AI newsletter, and Zane from Superhuman and Pete and Noah from the Neuron and Ferris from the DFU all read this newsletter, it's kind of like, all right, I feel like I got to do it. And so that's why it works. It's private. It is high touch. I don't even make the people send me, or rather sign up via a subscribe form. I literally got Sean's email and put him in the list myself. You want it to feel really special. And I reinforce that in the content. I talk about who's joining every time I read the newsletter. So that's like why I think it worked for me. The overall like framework. So if you wanted to do this for yourself, the one thing you have to believe is that you have a very high LTV offer such that every reader who joins could be, if they convert, could be worth a tremendous amount of money to you. That's where it works for customer acquisition. So that would be like events, so Semaphore, which is like a media publisher, has an invite-only newsletter called the CEO Signal because they have like their own version of like Davos, basically. There's another company I had, it's called like Tiger 21. It's like a high-end peer network. It's a little bit like Hampton, but like ultra high net worth, $50, $100 million plus minimum. They invest together and talk about finances and stuff. So that's like cool. Events, communities, and then what I do, which is services. That's who I think it primarily works for.
It's nice. And I've seen some of these before, more in like the info product creatory space. I've seen a bunch of people who've like, there's one guy, and I'm going to find this out. I'm going to put it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, because I've completely blanked on his name and his business name. But basically, he limited his newsletter to 1,000 subscribers, and it was invite only. And that was like super high signal and like had the scarcity effect of like, I'm actually going to make this, there's only going to be 1,000 people on the list. And if you're not reading regularly, I'm going to remove you and open up your spot for someone else, but it can only be 1,000 people. And he makes $1 million+ a year off that newsletter. Or he did like 2-3 years ago when he did it.
I saw that somewhere. Yeah. At the end of the day, like you have to believe, and frankly, like I think everybody should be doing this. Like I do this newsletter accelerator thing a couple times a year where we work with folks. And like the thing that I try to tell people is like, yeah, you can build a newsletter business just using ads. That is technically possible, but it is in general very hard to do. You either need to believe that you have a huge organic audience to begin with, which is what happened to like the Rundown or the Neuron or Suburban. They were just bringing people down from Twitter or LinkedIn. Or you need to be extremely niche. So like Secret CFO runs a finance, like SVP of finance, CFO focused newsletter that like kills it. It's 40 or 50,000 subscribers. And if I asked you to like guess in your head what his revenue he was doing, I can guarantee you the number is higher than whatever you would be thinking like in your head. It's a ridiculously well monetized newsletter. Most people
Tyler might have
are not in those buckets. Maybe. I'll let Tyler decide. But you need that. And so what everybody should be doing is having what I call like the media mullet, which is kind of like a funny way of saying it, or I also call it like stacking revenue. But you basically need a mullet, which is a free sponsor monetized content in the front, and then high LTV digital products and or services in the back that are at the minimum $1,000. That is how you build a really good newsletter business. And that is also generally what is a prerequisite for believing that it is worth it to manually invite people to your newsletter.
Yeah,
those are the best.
I like a couple of the things you touched on. It's super interesting. It feels like you took a lot of ideas kind of borrowed from like tech or kind of sales stuff, which I always think is interesting, that like newsletter people just kind of think about the editorial stuff and they kind of don't lean into like emails in the way that like an e-commerce brand was. And I think one of the things you kind of went past pretty quickly is the social proof that you do in each of the newsletters, which is literally one of my favorite things, right? You say, XYZ from XYZ newsletter, joined today. And I think that's such a powerful tool. And I don't know if you automate that at all, but, or, if you're customizing that at all, but I think that's like a really cool thing that people should, could think about. And then I think the other thing is, I think it's just super interesting that you could do something, like a list, right? It's right out of tech, where you're saying like, hey, there's a wait list for this thing. That's such a cool way to drum up demand. And I think people just aren't used to it, right? It's like a lot of things in newsletters just kind of go away because they're so overdone, right? It's like the referral program, like people are over that, right? Like just trying to get as many people on your list with Facebook ads is tough. But if you can kind of create this like weird demand, like some sort of tech product that you have to get on the wait list, I think that's super, super valuable.
Let's talk a little bit, because I want to, there's like so much list that I want to touch on, but I want to get into like the meat and bones of, I guess, of like coming up with an idea and like actually running through that. So let's maybe start with like that idea generation of like, you talked already about like basically the main criteria, it sounds like, to be able to run one of these successfully is, hey, if you want to make money off a newsletter that only has 1,000 subscribers, for example, guess what? You have to have some sort of really high ticket offer, because if you only have 1,000 subscribers and you want to make $1 million, you're going to have to make $1,000 per subscriber, basically, right? On average, is like how the math is going to have to math out. So other than that, like that we have that restriction, but like what other restrictions do you think there are? Like, do you think this is something that could potentially work in like local newsletters in the consumer space? Like, what are some examples of like maybe even like newsletter operators you've seen, or just like people where you're like, hey, that dude should have a invite-only newsletter. That person should be starting one. Like, what do you see out there?
Yeah. So, okay. So let's take the condition that we must believe, which is like customers have to be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to you. But like we don't have that many, but like there are clients we have that pay us as much as like $30,000 to $40,000 a month, like to the agency for growth services, right? And so like for us, most people are not that high. It's based on spend, but like to us, like people can be like extremely high LTV customers. And so what are the other scenarios where that could be true? So you said local. There's a guy in this accelerator thing who runs like a local newsletter in Queens, one of their other boroughs near me here in New York. And we kind of pivoted his newsletter over the past couple of weeks because he's really focused on selling ads and like he was focused on a very niche part of Queens. He runs an SEO agency. And so I was like, man, dude, you should have a local newsletter that's in Queens, but it should be like a business owner focused local newsletter, or ideally you can just have a local newsletter, but it should be like at least have a business section that is useful to those people. And then your newsletter is effectively just marketing emails that people actually want to read. And then it becomes a lead gen funnel for your SEO business, for your SEO services business. I do think that like high ticket offers, especially services, are the easiest thing that you can do to get to $1 million a year. I mean, it's like there's no product, it's not like e-commerce where you have to spend money in order to test something, right? It's not software you got to spend 6 months creating a product. It's like you sell your time, and if that doesn't work, you just take a different skill and sell that instead. And we did, yeah. So one thing I'd stand out is I do think like more people should think and have that orientation. But if we looked at like another newsletter, like I think we said Secret CFO right earlier. So he has an ad monetized business. He sells, impressions basically to, Vanta or Ramp or companies that want to get in front of SVPs of finance or CFOs. It would also make sense for him to have some kind of invite-only newsletter. What if he wanted to do something where he was monetizing the leader or the executive directly? What if he wanted to do a private community for the top finance newsletters from all the major startups right now? The CFO of Ramp, the CFO of Row, the CFO of Perplexity, all together. That would be interesting and really useful. And he would have a right to win in that space. And for him then, he gets a lot of his audience from like Twitter and whatnot. But at that point, he should be willing to go on to LinkedIn and find those people, if they're not on the newsletter already, and bring them in. Because that might be a 10, 15, in some cases, some of these executive communities are as much as $25,000 a year, high ticket offer.
I like that. And I really like something that I hadn't thought much about before, but when you said that, it makes a lot of sense to me, is this idea of like the private or the invite only sort of premium newsletter into the community. Because something I've often thought about is like, why even do this as a newsletter? Why not just do this as an invite only community, right? Like, why bother with like the content that, I mean, I'm sure like yours is great and these ones are great, but like we're not sharing like $1 million secrets here necessarily that they couldn't get in a public newsletter, right? Like we're saying a lot of the same stuff in other places. Whereas the access to the people is really unique. And then I was like, oh, but hang on, like the problem with that obviously is if you don't have the community yet, like you can't email 5 people and get them into that community and have like no one there. Whereas if you email everyone and get them into the private newsletter where they know that other people are there and then launch a community on the top of that, right? That makes sense because then you do have the people already and they're already interested in waiting, and you can be pretty confident that if you have 1,000 people who are reading the newsletter and you launch the community, you're going to get enough of those people to like overcome the cold start problem of like whoever it is. Like let's say Sean from Industry Dive jumps in and is like the only person there and is like, well, this sucks, gonna leave, which would be not great for trying to sell him stuff in the future, presumably.
It's also more of a two-way door, right? So like Adam Robinson, who's like a big LinkedIn SaaS guy, has this I think this weekly like live session he does. It's like Unfuck Your Startup, where people come and they have issues and he goes through them. Like it's very hard to like unfuck a community. Like if you mess your community up, that's kind of it. Like you can't revive it. It's not like Call of Duty where you get to respawn. It's kind of like done. Whereas like an email newsletter, very easy to walk it back, or people can come and go, and it doesn't really doesn't impact at all the experience of all the other users. That's part of why I think it works a little bit better, I would say. That's another thing I would think about.
But is there anything that you think prohibits, like me, right, playing in the consumer space, from just taking this model and just doing it at scale, right? Like, I guess I'm limited by the number of LinkedIn messages I can send, but have you ever seen anyone do this with, maybe Twitter messages, DMs on Instagram, something like that in the consumer space? Like, could it scale to hundreds of thousands or millions of people versus, just a high LTV, kind of B2B newsletter?
I think it's way harder and probably not worth the time. So like what I am doing is basically like ABM marketing, account-based marketing, which is like, HubSpot does ABM marketing, right? Because like somebody might pay HubSpot $50,000 a year for CRM software. And so like they're super willing to host events or, meet people in person and shake hands and like kiss babies, like that kind of thing, because the customer is worth so much to them. and they want to inundate them with value. And that's, I'm a big fan of like the Alex Hormozi principle, which is like give away the secret, sell the execution. Like I want to do things that are so valuable. People are like, dude, you're crazy for giving this away for free. And then some of them are like, yeah, I love all this. This sounds like a lot of work. Like I want you to just do it. The other thing that is quite endemic or characteristic of people, so other than like high LTV, ideally industries where you can easily find people, industries or functions or interest groups where there are people congregate naturally. For me, anyone who is on LinkedIn, right? I could do this offer for a content marketing agency, for an e-commerce agency, for people who are high net worth, fairly easy to identify those people on Twitter, where people are talking about money a lot more than LinkedIn. So like basically answer the question, like, is there like there's e-commerce Twitter, right? There's like info Twitter, there's like money Twitter, right? Is there a version of that for your ICP, your ideal customer profile? And if there is, then you can probably do it there. For LinkedIn, that is like built into the product, right? People's functions, people's industries are built in. There's some additional feed curation. Like I tend to get newsletter people, and a newsletter is not like a function, on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn's smart enough to know that's the type of content I care about. You also want to probably believe that. That's what will make it easier. And this is why I think it is much harder to do with consumer offers. There are high ticket consumer offers, right? MarketBeat does something close to $50 million a year with like 20 or 30 employees. That is a consumer offer that is make money online, right? Is like learn how to trade stocks, or they have, dozens of offers they partner with, and people might pay them or their partners thousands of dollars for that. There are BizOp offers, business opportunities. So there's a guy, Mason Dewar, who teaches you how to make 10K a month doing copywriting. There's Dickie Bush and Nicholas Cole, who teach you how to become a digital ghostwriter. That's a $7,000 program. Those are a lot harder to invite people to because there's not a collective in the way there is on LinkedIn or Twitter of those folks.
I want to move on, if we can, to the idea, because you told us beforehand that you had a friend who you think, or is that too strong? No, you said that you think they would do well with an invite-only newsletter. Yeah. No, obviously he's a friend. No.
That's what we're concerned about, if he liked you or not.
But yeah, you said
he's real. I promise. Yeah.
He has a LinkedIn profile, so he must be.
He goes to another school.
Fake.
It's actually funny. I actually saw his LinkedIn post about where he works, which I'm sure we'll get into. But he's an interesting character. He came on my radar a couple days ago, so it's funny you brought him up.
Dude, we co-work together. I just came from that spot. We have this whole we call it like the media mafia. I work with all these like young kids who do this crazy stuff. And it's another story, but it's quite interesting.
Well, then tell us who it is, and then like let's just like run through, I guess, like how step by step we would build this invite-only newsletter for him, like why we would do that, I guess, like what the business case is for that, and like I guess there are a couple of jumping in points where we can talk about the like ask some questions and think about like how maybe this could be improved and stuff as well.
Yeah, dude. So this is fun. Seamus doesn't even know I'm doing this. This will be cute. So Seamus is awesome. So I'll give you a till the on Seamus. So Seamus is 19 years old. He started his business about 4 or 5 months ago. I actually met him. He dropped out of college. I met him the third day after he dropped out. We went to this like Hampton event together at this like spa thing called Othership, and we hung out. And I really liked him, and so we kind of started co-working with some other friends. He does like $1 million of ARR, and again, he's like 19, right? So he's a kid. It's awesome, and all these people.
What does he do? Like, how does he make the revenue?
Yeah. So Deal Room is basically LinkedIn content for B2B founders. So if you hire Deal Room, and let's say you're the founder of Whisperflow or Gamma, to name your like B2B AI company, he's going to go and he's going to have his team interview you a couple times a week and write all of your LinkedIn content, stories, tactics, everything that is going to have you be seen as a high value thinker and as a thought partner as opposed to a vendor on LinkedIn, so that you get leads and make high LTV sales.
I see the product we're going to be selling. That's a good product.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm a potential customer. I want to be. I want to ask more questions about the product, but I can ask him at some other point. Let's talk about the newsletter then, right? So, like, I guess what's interesting to me about that is like this is an agency format, right? Where it's like probably quite hard to distinguish yourself because like you can go to HubSpot, and you can quickly look at HubSpot versus Salesforce versus another CRM and be like, does it have the features that I want? Right? Does it have what I need? And make that decision. With like a performance marketing agency like the Feed, or with something like this, it's you kind of have to go off like word of mouth, and whether you like who do you want to do business with, like which one of the people do you like the most to want to work with them, and like who is already working with them as like a signal of what they do. Because if you're working with you guys right at the Feed, like I know you work with great people and obviously they're happy, so you must be doing a great job, but it's not like there's someone else doing it for them at the same time that they can like benchmark against, right? Like it's very difficult to really know like who to trust. Like, if your CRM isn't working, that it's not working and that you need to change. So like, how do you, does that play into this of like why like having a newsletter or like an invite only newsletter is advantageous? Or like, why do you think he's a good fit to start this basically?
Yeah. So where B2B is going is people, what if you really want to extrapolate this? So let's say we're in a world where like it's and this is becoming more true. It's really easy to spin up software with AI. And you could argue that that is going to let a lot more people who are non-technical come into the market. There's going to be a lot more supply of software and services to some extent. We've got the internet and Alex Moses running around telling people how to make 10K a month, that kind of stuff. Okay, well, in that world, how do you stand out? Well, at the end of the day, people buy from people that they know, like, and trust. And the same thing that's happening to media, which is there is, in general, on average, a distrust of traditional media properties. And a lot of money and attention is flowing to independent media houses, places like Democracy Docket or The Lever. This is also true in B2B, places like Status by Oliver Darcy, who covers media and tech instead of CNN. In the broader news landscape, places like 1440, right, instead of like the Wall Street Journal. It's all flowing this way. The same thing is happening in content in B2B. Nobody wants to read, a fancy 60-page done-up lead magnet from HubSpot. It's like, I don't know the marketing manager who made that. Like, are they really an operator? Like, people trust people, and it's why, like, some of the best examples of this are like Sean Purdy and Sam Parr. Like, they are amazing operators, obviously, and I don't mean any discredit by saying this about them, but like they are also, and they would be the first to say this, like B2B influencers. So what does all that mean? Well, how do you get people to know, like, and trust you? One is you write content on discovery platforms like LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, right, Instagram, any kind of discovery platform for top of funnel. But then what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that maybe 10% of people, 10% of your audience might see any given piece of content. Well, in your email newsletter, right, 40%, 50%, sometimes 60% of the people who are email subscribers are going to see that content. It also is much longer form, right? It's a much better asset at getting people to know, like, and trust you. And unlike, messaging people in high volume or cold emailing them to hop on a sales call with you, the frequency with which you get interactions with your prospects is significantly higher, right? Whatever market you operate in, if there's a 10,000 people, not all 10,000 are in the market at any given time. Maybe 250, 500 are in the market at any given one time. How do you maintain a relationship with them outside of that? It's via email. And unlike a sales call where you get maybe one shot per quarter to close somebody, right? If I don't close a sales call, I'm not going to reach out in 2 more weeks for another sales call. Like, that was done. I might reach out in 3 months. I get to email people every week or every 2 weeks, and they're constantly think of me. So when they are in market, or if we did the newsletter for Seamus, when Seamus's ICP is in market, his ICP is going to be VC investors, right? It's going to be B2B founders who are running tech companies, ideally venture funded. They're going to think of Seamus, or they're going to think of me in my market.
I like it. One of the things you did that I think is really interesting is you chose for your newsletter like you send twice monthly, pretty much, right? So you don't commit, I think, to like a specific day necessarily. So you don't have a specific like format, right? It varies occasionally, but it's sort of like promises, like basically just twice a month, I'm going to send you something that you'll find interesting. Might be valuable, might just be interesting, but it's going to be something that you're going to want to read and you'll be interested for the next one. How do you come up with something like that if you're Seamus? Like what format are you picking as something that works well for an invite-only newsletter?
Yeah. So what we've talked about so far is like your offer, right? You need high LTV stuff. I'm not going to write it all down here, but where it's like you need events, or you need a service, or you need, in Secret CFO's version, right? That we could just easily be talking about him and talk about him doing, a private community or high ticket events or something like that. So now we're talking about the content piece. What should you actually write? So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Example one. So do you guys know StoryArb, Alex Lieberman's company?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think they have an awesome newsletter. I like Alex. I know Alex a little bit. I do not think that their newsletter, if I had to guess, this is not a newsletter that is great at converting people into leads. So we're going to talk about what not to do in your content and then talk about what to do. This is a gorgeous newsletter, by the way. Like from a design perspective, this is like chef's kiss, amazing. So StoryArb is also like a content agency, but they do like LinkedIn, your blog posts and lead magnets for big companies, right? That's what StoryArb does. It is very much like a team written newsletter, and it's a little bit newsy, right? Here's some posts that we really liked, stuff that we thought was really interesting. Here's a very brief note from our head of content and some strong opinions that we have, and some Q&A that we've done with our readers to show you this is like interesting, right, and useful. But if you want somebody to pay you $10,000 a month, which is what I think StoryArb's price point roughly is, maybe it's even higher, this is not going to get somebody to trust you enough to do that. What works better, and what Seamus should do if he were to start his newsletter, I'll show you two versions. So one is going to be like my kind of stuff. So let me just... So I write about three things, I would say. One is like industry trends. So tell me like what's happening that I need to know about, like what's changing systemically. So for instance, like media companies are trying to launch high ticket products to better monetize their audience, and companies that have high LTV products are trying to buy up or launch media companies. HubSpot, right, is buying up media. Robinhood acquired Market Snacks, is an offshoot media, et cetera, et cetera. That's like interesting from a trend perspective. The next thing I do is I'll recap events, things that are high value, like the newsletter conference, for instance, in New York, or a media operator that people can't be at, and people appreciate that. The final thing I do is tactics. Let me tell you, proof, promise, process. We generated proof $250,000 for a 15,000 person newsletter. We did like a digital product launch for them. That's proof. Promise is basically, hey, I'm going to walk you through this playbook on how to do it. Here's some more proof. There's literally, how could it be more real than showing somebody a Stripe notification thing? And then process is I go through the process of like, how did that launch? How did we come up with the ICP and the marketing emails and the sales the sales page and all the different stuff. So what would Seamus do, or what should Seamus do? Well, and the other thing I'll say is this is like, there's no design here, right? It comes from me, and this is true, like it does come from me. And so I'm building credibility, right?
Which is interesting, actually. If you think about StoryArb, like I wonder if what your newsletter and their newsletter is doing is, it has a slightly different job, I would imagine, where like I love the way that you're doing this, and it sounds like that would be a great fit for Seamus as well. An interesting thing about StoryArb's newsletter is it's almost the product, right? What you're almost doing with that newsletter is basically sending a reminder of like, hey guys, you know how shitty your corporate email newsletter is and how it doesn't look fancy like this. Well, this is what yours could look like if you paid us $10,000 a month, right? So I think there's something, maybe it's doing something slightly different there, but I totally agree. Like the content of what you're putting out is like is definitely going to lead to a bunch more sales than the content of what's going into StoryArb.
If I'm the CMO of Gamma, which is like a PowerPoint, competitor, or I don't know, like some other AI company, I think I will generate significantly more leads writing an email to our entire lead list that is from me, so they have a personal touch point, and then doing like a done up email. I think you want to navigate away from brand, and you want to go towards building a relationship with an individual. People should know the CMO of Gamma by name, the CMO of Whisperflow by name, like any kind of B2B services or SaaS by name. That is, I think, how you differentiate. People buy from people. I think that is much more likely to work. I'll give you another example. Marketing Max Bidna. He has a newsletter that is founder written. I'm bringing it over here for a second. He has a
Yeah, I mean,
newsletter
I
that's
think
founder
the
written.
standard, right? Imagine if that was written by Alex Lieberman or ghost written by it, right? There'd be so much more credibility there.
Yeah, and so
Yeah,
we won't
I
go through
think
Max's
you
whole
have
thing, but
space for
like,
both, right? Like I think you have the space for like that, like if what you're selling is a shiny newsletter to people, you probably want to have a shiny newsletter of your own. But at the same time, yeah, absolutely having the founder sort of driven stuff or the like the uh, what is it that saying? I can't remember who keeps saying that to me, but I stole it once like 10 years ago, and I love to keep saying it of like the like everything equal, people buy from friends. So make everything equal and then go make a load of friends.
Hmm.
I love that saying.
I like that. I like that. Um, so for Seamus, right? I mean, just quickly, like other people are kind of doing this. This is not invite only, but like Max has an email list that is written. His actually is ghost written, but it does sound like it's written from him, and it's very tactical. He gives away like one marketing hack a week. He launched an agency on the back of this, and I think he's been public about this, but like I won't say the exact revenue number, but they hit $1 million of ARR in like 90 to 120 days at the beginning of this year. Like really cool. So I think more people should do this. How could Seamus do this? Um, I don't know the content marketing space, but I can tell you like it is more useful to go to events that are or write about events that are related to your ICP. So Seamus probably cares about venture-backed companies, probably Series A to Series B is my guess, because they have enough money to spend on content and see the value of content marketing, but they're not so big that you're not going to you're not going to have to go through all the red tape. So whatever, let's say his ICP is B2B AI companies that are venture backed. I'm sure there's a half dozen events, around that HubSpot or other companies do. He should be going to those and writing extremely clear, concise takeaways on what to do from a content marketing perspective for these B2B brands, right? The other thing, I don't know trends in content marketing, but I will tell you process. So Seamus writes LinkedIn content. You guys help me out here because you guys both write LinkedIn content too. But like, here's what I would do if I were Seamus. I would write to people about break down a content strategy for one of his clients. So if he was breaking down me, what do I write about on LinkedIn? It's generally tactics. I just really cover tactics, and I cover that across newsletter content, growth, generally with paid ads, and monetization, digital products, services, and sponsorships. And so he would probably start writing about how do you do an umbrella of content? Okay, so Nathan, you should write about monetization. And monetization should be digital products, services, and sponsorships. Within sponsorships, you should have a post that is on how do you get your first sponsor? What does a good sponsor content slot look like in a newsletter? Should it be after the first story? Should it be at the very top of the newsletter? How do you build a media kit? Hey, let's do a lead magnet where you break apart or aggregate 20 media kits in the largest, newsletters, and everybody will grab that, right? It's the process for how you map out a content strategy. And then he talked about hooks, and maybe then he talked about in a separate thing, hey, how do you manage your DMs on LinkedIn using a tool like Condo? So like when I come in here, I don't know if you can still see my screen, but like we can see, we tag people up, me and some of my team based on who they are. And like if people we feel like are qualified for the agency, generally I'm the one who's talking to them. I've got like 300 people that I actively manage conversations with, but sometimes my team will help me if it's just like beginner level questions from folks. So he might do a whole thing on, how to do that. Tactics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I love that. We don't have a huge amount of time left. There's two things on this that I really, really want to make sure we cover. So maybe we can like move to one of those, which is, I guess the first one that I'm really interested in that I haven't heard too much talked about is like, let's say you've run this playbook, right? So you're Seamus, you have your newsletter, you're writing it once or twice a month, you're inviting people, you're being smart about it, you're using LinkedIn to invite them, you're not asking them to go to some sign up page, you're saying, hey, I'll add you, what's the right email, is this the right email address, or what's the right email address, blah, 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 blah. You've got them on the list, you're writing, they're reading it, they're enjoying it. How do you actually convert those people into customers?
Yeah. So maybe 3 to 4 different ways. Way number one is you should have call to actions anytime you're doing one of these case studies or extremely tactical things. So when I did the like $250,000 plus like product launch with Jesse, and I wrote that whole newsletter about how we did it, I said, like, several times in that newsletter, like, if you'd like us to do this for you, like, reach out here. And that goes either to like book a call thing or to our website or to, a Typeform submit. That's way number one. Way number two is that you should know exactly who is on your list and what their roles are. So once you grab their email, you need to create a bunch of custom fields. So you know what company is this person at, what's their role, et cetera, et cetera. Or you just use a tool like Megahit, which so I use a lot of Megahit. Like, it just enriches all of my subscribers, and I can just filter for a quick list of CEOs. I can immediately go, oh, there's Nathan Barry, there's Rowan Chung and Tim Hulskamp and Robert Dipple from Morning Brew. Like, I just have that list, and I can just reach out to people and go, I actually did this with the Gist. I reached out to one of the co-founders, like, hey, thanks for reading my newsletter. I'd love to hop on a call. I can see that they're engaged. You can see who's opening and who's clicking. And so I just go to each of those people who's been reading a lot lately. Oh, I think we should do like a catch-up call. That's like the second way that I would do it. And then the third thing I'll say is just have an evergreen, I don't know what they call it, like footer, basically, of like ways that we can help you. Those are the main things that I would do. There's other stuff, but that's, if I had to do a quick list, that's what I do.
Yeah, I love that second one. I think it's like it's a super good way to stay in touch with people, and it's like not cold emailing, right? It's like you can almost look at this entire email, even if you're not using it for anything else. It's kind of what you talked about at the beginning, but it's just kind of keeping people warm, right? So when you do need to, the jab, right hook, when you need to take the right hook, right? It's not as awkward and, kind of the first time you're talking to them. So I love that.
Yeah.
And then one other thing that I want to chat about as well is, I think Tyler sort of like briefly touched on it, but like, let's say you're doing something and you have one of these newsletters, and like you say, like in the newsletter space, we're a pretty small community. And maybe the first 100, 200, 500, or for Seamus, maybe his first 200, 500,000 subscribers come from this invite only flow, and he's doing that himself, or he has someone on his team doing it and it's manageable to do that way. Is there a way that you can sort of scale that or loosen it up so that you can start adding more people in without necessarily losing what makes it feel special, which is this sort of like, hey, you have to be invited, or it's a private thing that gives it that sort of like cachet and gets people interested? Is there a way, like, how do you open it up, or do you scale, or like, what are you doing with your newsletter there?
Yeah. So you could always separate the content. So for instance, like, I was talking to Tom Brady's team, like maybe 4 months ago or something. And like, to my understanding is he has like a basic invite only newsletter that is for like top sports people. That might be like, I'm just making names up, but I assume like Mark Cuban is probably on that newsletter because he's a fancy guy and he's like has a sports team. It's going to be like Tom, like all his friends. And I think they have a consumer newsletter as well. My guess is like they're just writing two different pieces of content, right? And like there's the private stuff that only goes to the private people, and there's what goes to everybody else. That is like one thing that you can do. Often like the best solutions are often the most simple ones, which is that you could just invite more than the people who are private, and don't tell people that it's not private anymore as you grow. Like that to me is the simplest thing. It requires no new content. You keep the perception of privacy. I would start with that. We're going to do something where it's a little bit more like the Tom model, where beginners will get more kind of beginner related content. I'm going to keep some of the client stuff for just our biggest folks. But now as we have products that technically are not for people who are necessarily doing 7 figures and above, it's for the long tail. I need to be able to serve both people with my content.
Nice. What are like, Tyler, I want to make sure we leave time for you to ask questions as well. But like, one question I always like to ask about this is like, what are mistakes that you think someone like Seamus, for example, not picking on him in particular, but if he goes out and does this, like, what is a common mistake that someone like him might make when trying to do this that you luckily managed to avoid, or you've seen other people trip up on if you're going for an invite-only newsletter?
Yeah. I think the number one mistake you could make is not writing valuable stuff. like I think a lot of people, when you have like a startup idea or you whatever you sell a service or anything. It's kind of like, I don't want to, I remember some guy got on the phone with my buddy Oliver and wanted him to like sign an NDA before he told him about his startup idea. I was like, dude, come on, man. Like, well, I'm not doing this. It's ridiculous. It's like people get really scared about sharing all the juice, all the sauce. And in reality, like you should be writing things that are so deeply valuable that people can't believe it's free. Your free stuff should be as good as the paid stuff of your peers. That's what I endeavor to do. And I think we do a good job of that. We get great feedback from Robert's team and Sean and Tim and like, all the major newsletter operators. And I hope what we've done is kind of become more of like the Rolex agency where we work with the top people and we do the best. And that's also now what we're trying to do for like the consumer folks as well. The second major mistake that you can make is not consistently reinforcing the scarcity of the newsletter. And so like I talk about it on stuff like this as a private newsletter because it is like I go and I make a point of talking about the newsletter. Brad Worthington, I didn't ask him to do this, but was very kind to like do a write-up about my newsletter. He used to lead content at The Hustle about it says private invite only newsletter that like everybody should be reading. And then the third thing that I do, which we talked about a little bit earlier, is every single time I write the newsletter, which I only do twice a month, by the way, because that's what I can commit to. I want to make the best pieces of content. I'd write it once a month if that was, if I could only do it once a month, but it has to be the best content first. But I talk about every single person who joins. And so you're constantly seeing people that are CEOs, CMOs, founders, chiefs of staff come on that newsletter. That is hyper valuable. Constantly reinforce the value.
Dude, this was a crazy amount of value. This has been awesome. I have one general question. What's your hottest take in the newsletter space?
I think that a lot of people are like, and not necessarily with ill intent, are perpetuating like kind of a stupid idea, which is that you can build a big newsletter business very easily by selling ads. And I think it's becoming this like make money online thing, which is like, oh, hey, you acquire an audience and you sell some ads and then like, oh my God, like money is like magically appearing and you get to quit your job and you have financial freedom. I think that is not true. What I try to tell people in my free stuff and my paid stuff is like, that is possible. I have friends that have done that, like Noah at The Neuron, but it's not the norm. What you should be doing, not to like rehash, but often we don't need to be taught, we need to be reminded. You need to have a media model. You need to stack revenue, ads plus either a high ticket that's $1,000 or more, digital product or service. And you should be starting with the monetization and letting that decide how you grow. That's the most important thing. I sell high ticket, therefore I'm willing to invite people. If you sold something that was, $1,500 and that was your only thing, maybe you could invite people, but you're going to need to believe that you have or can build an organic audience on Twitter and LinkedIn so you can pull people down at scale who are warmed up and ready to buy from you. If you're going to sell low ticket products only or just to start at $30, you're probably going to need to run paid ads and believe that you can convert cold traffic because inviting people is not going to work, right? Start with the monetization. How are you going to make money? That must define the content. It must define how you grow. Too many people start with the growth and think the money's just going to come. And that's not true.
Louis, you got anything else?
I think we're at time. I mean, we could go all day, but I think what we'll have to do is have Nathan back for a Q&A session where we can get into more tactics. Like one of the cool things that Nathan does is obviously working with so many different newsletters across paid growth, and would love to get some of his insights into what's working on like paid social growth in particular and what he's seeing there, which would be super interesting, and get some questions from listeners and viewers answered. Nathan, this is a weird point where normally we would say, where can people go and sign up to your newsletter? But yeah, where do we send people?
Let's do two things. So each time I've done one of these, I have like opened up the newsletter for like 24 to 48 hours. So we can do that in like the YouTube comments. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's where I share a lot of my free stuff. And then we run an accelerator a couple times a year. I'll let people kind of find that on their own, but I think that's very valuable. And if people like this kind of content, I have a podcast that I do called Personal IPO, where I basically sit down with founders that have built big audiences, 100,000 plus, and use that to start companies that are 7, 8, 9 figures. And we get hyper tactical. And so if you're into newsletters, if you're into content, I think you'll like that. Sam Parr, Justin Welsh, Jesse Puggi. We've had a lot of cool people on that. We have a lot of cool people who are coming up.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really awesome. I learned a lot. Tyler has let me ask questions for once, which is nice. Last time he didn't let me ask any questions for half an hour. I was very, very sad. So it's always a bonus.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.